I can't turn back now. My future self came back to stop me from performing this strange rite. This is the moment that will change everything. On the planet Dromus, the tradition of sexual rites with males is not just a practice, it's a sacred rite of passage. The Neptus Space Station hummed with life as its massive structure hovered in the vacuum of space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant star's light. As a crossroads of galactic culture and commerce, Neptus was a beacon amidst the vastness of the universe, where beings from every corner of the galaxy converged. For Ethan Harlow, a systems engineer, the station was more than just a place of work. It was a front-row seat to the incredible diversity of life. From his control room, Ethan monitored data streams, his movements efficient and precise. Every adjustment to the power grid, every system tweak was just another day in his endless routine of fixing and calibrating. But it was here, amidst the hum of technology, that Ethan's life was about to change forever. His communicator buzzed, a sharp interruption to his focused concentration. "Commander Harlow," came the voice through the static, "we have an incoming delegation from Dromus. They're requesting assistance in docking. Please report to Docking Bay 3 immediately." Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes momentarily flickering to the clock. "On my way." He grabbed his toolkit and made his way down the station's long metallic corridors, his boots making rhythmic clanks against the cold floor. The ship from Dromus was already docked, its organic curves an astonishing sight against the more industrial backdrop of Neptus. When Ethan entered Docking Bay 3, his eyes were drawn immediately to a tall woman standing beside the ship. She stood with an effortless grace, her skin glowing faintly green under the artificial lighting, and her long silvery hair cascading like liquid mercury. Zephyr, the Dromian diplomat, was as mesmerizing as she was intimidating. Her violet eyes locked onto his with an intensity that almost took his breath away. "You must be the engineer," she said, her voice melodic and hypnotic. Ethan extended a hand, surprised at the firm warmth of her skin. "Commander Ethan Harlow, what seems to be the problem with your ship?" Zephyr smiled, a slight curve of her lips that seemed to suggest she already knew the answer. "Our power coupling is incompatible with Neptus's grid. We need someone who can make the adjustments. I was told you're the best." Ethan's mind shifted to the technical problem at hand. "I can modify the systems to make the connection work. Shouldn't take more than an hour," he said, already pulling out the necessary tools and moving toward the workbench. Zephyr followed, her presence oddly comforting, yet unsettling. She moved with a fluid elegance, each motion deliberate and graceful. As they worked side by side, Ethan couldn't help but notice the rhythm in her actions, as though her movements were part of some elegant dance. The way her fingers slid across the control panels, the subtle flex of her wrist, was mesmerizing. He found himself watching her more often than he cared to admit, distracted by her ease with the machinery, but also by the strange aura of power she seemed to exude. They worked in silence at first, the clink of metal against metal, and the soft hum of the station filling the void between them. But then Zephyr spoke again, breaking the silence. "You know," she said casually, as if she were commenting on something mundane, "your species fascinates me. You're so robust, yet in some ways so clumsy in comparison to ours." Ethan chuckled, unable to resist the playful tone in her voice. "That's one way of putting it. I guess we rely more on strength than finesse." Zephyr smiled, her violet eyes reflecting something deeper, something thoughtful. "Not brute strength, but adaptability. Your species has that in abundance. It's something I admire." As the hours passed, the work progressed quickly, but it was the ongoing conversation with Zephyr that kept Ethan engaged. She told him of Dromus, of the telepathic bonds her people shared, and how their rituals were centered around mental connections. Ethan, intrigued, couldn't help but ask more about their traditions, though something still nagged at him. It all felt so alien, so different from everything he knew. Finally, the last connection was made, and Zephyr turned to him, her eyes locking with his again. "I must thank you again, Commander Harlow. Your skills are impressive, and I have another request." Ethan looked up, wiping his brow, his curiosity piqued. "What's that?" Zephyr took a deep breath, her expression growing more serious. My sister Arya has come of age. It is customary in Dromus for a newly bonded pair to assist younger siblings in their education. She paused, watching Ethan closely. Arya must learn what it means to be with a male, and I believe it is only fitting that you, as one of the most respected men I've met here, help her. Ethan froze, his tools hanging from his hand. His mind raced as the weight of her words settled in. The request was so foreign, so far from anything he had ever imagined. You want me to help her? His voice caught in his throat, barely able to form the words. Zephyr's gaze softened, though there was a hint of something deeper in her expression. In Dromus, this is considered a sacred rite of passage. I understand this may be difficult for you, but I am asking you, as a friend and ally, to help Arya. The air in the room thickened. Ethan stood motionless, the world around him fading to a quiet hum as he tried to process her words. His thoughts clashed. What Zephyr was asking was unfathomable in the context of everything he knew. Yet her sincerity was undeniable, and there was an undeniable pull to her presence that made his resistance waver. Zephyr continued to hold his gaze, waiting for his response. Ethan opened his mouth, his mind reeling, but no words came. The silence stretched between them, heavy with anticipation. All that remained was the sound of the station's systems working, the rhythm of technology, and the unspoken tension between two worlds colliding. The buzz of the Neptus station was constant, but something had changed in the air. Ethan was working late in his engineering lab, reviewing diagnostics when the security alarm sounded throughout the station. A brief message flashed across his terminal. Unauthorized ship approaching, docking bay 2. It was unusual for any ships to come in unannounced, especially with the station's rigorous security protocols. His heart skipped a beat. There had been whispers among the crew of strange occurrences over the past few weeks, unexplained malfunctions, odd sightings in the lower levels. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence was soon broken by a sharp knock at the door. He turned, expecting a colleague, but instead a tall, imposing figure stepped inside. His black hair was cut short, his eyes cold and calculating, and his military-grade spacesuit was worn as though he had traveled through 1,000 systems. Ethan's eyes narrowed at the man's presence. I'm sorry, Ethan said, straightening up. I don't believe we've met. The stranger's lips curled into a thin smile. No, we haven't. My name is Kaldor. I believe we have much to discuss. Ethan instinctively reached for the emergency comm, but something about the man's presence made him hesitate. There was a weight to Kaldor's gaze, something unsettling, as if this was no ordinary encounter. You're not supposed to be here, Ethan said, keeping his tone steady. This station is a neutral zone. You don't have clearance. Kaldor's eyes glinted as if he had expected the resistance. I'm not here for clearance, I'm here for you. Ethan's pulse quickened. What do you want? Kaldor stepped forward, a sudden seriousness in his voice. I want to prevent you from making a mistake that will cost you everything. The alliance you're building with the Dromus people will be the end of your species. A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He had heard rumors, yes, of a potential alliance with the Dromus, but this was the first time he had ever heard someone speak so directly about its consequences. The alliance? Ethan asked, incredulous. What are you talking about? Humanity's future is at stake, Kaldor continued, his tone grave. The Dromus alliance will lead to disaster, the downfall of your civilization. I'm here to stop it. Ethan was silent for a long moment. The room felt smaller. He studied the man, trying to gauge whether this was some kind of threat or a misguided warning. But Kaldor's confidence was chilling. He wasn't making a simple demand. He was delivering a prophecy. Before Ethan could respond, Kaldor took another step forward, lowering his voice. I'm not just a messenger. I've seen the outcome of your decisions. I've lived it. Ethan's confusion deepened. What are you saying? Kaldor hesitated before answering. I am you from the future, and I've come back to stop you from making a choice that will lead to the destruction of Earth. The words struck Ethan like a physical blow. His mouth went dry, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. The implications were staggering. How could this be possible? He looked at the man, this stranger who was him, or so he claimed, and tried to grasp what he was being told. You're me? From the future? Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Yes, Kaldor replied coldly. And you need to understand, the Dromis are not the allies you think they are. Their way of life, their traditions, will bring your civilization to its knees. I came back to stop you before you destroy everything. Ethan was paralyzed, staring at Kaldor, trying to reconcile the impossibility of the situation. His mind raced, struggling to process the idea that he was facing his future self. But why? He asked. Why are you here to stop the Alliance? Why are you so sure that it's wrong? Kaldor's expression softened slightly, but the edge of his voice remained sharp. Because I've seen the consequences. The merging of human and Dromis culture, the forced integration, it leads to the unraveling of human autonomy. Earth's survival is no longer in your hands. The Dromis' ability to control minds, their subtle influence, it will change you, change everything. Ethan's head swam with the impossibility of it all. His future self was asking him to make a decision that would affect not just his life, but the entire trajectory of human existence. But why? Why had Kaldor come back to stop him? And what made him so certain of the outcome? Before Ethan could formulate a response, the door to the lab slid open and Zephyr entered, her presence as striking as ever. She eyed Kaldor warily but did not speak. Ethan looked at her, his mind still reeling. Zephyr, he said, still trying to make sense of the situation. This man, he's me. From the future. Zephyr's eyes flicked between the two men, her face unreadable. I sense no lies in his words, she said softly, but I don't understand either. Kaldor turned to her. The alliance you seek will lead to the fall of your people as well. All of you will be destroyed by your own ambition. Zephyr didn't flinch. Instead, she studied Kaldor carefully. If you are truly Ethan from the future, then why should we trust you? How can we believe that the path you walk is the right one? Kaldor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he cast a long glance at Ethan, as though weighing his next words carefully. Finally, he spoke, his voice colder than before. You can't understand yet, but you will. The future is not set in stone, but the choices you make here will shape it irreparably. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting, and with it, his entire understanding of his mission. He had been working towards something, toward this very alliance, and now his future self was telling him that it was all a mistake. The truth of it gnawed at him, pulling him in two directions. Could this truly be the future? Or was Kaldor simply a maniac who had cracked under the pressure of his own choices? The moment of silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Ethan turned to Zephyr. We need time to think. There's too much at stake here. Zephyr nodded, but her eyes never left Kaldor. Perhaps, she said, her voice calm but tinged with something deeper. But if we stop now, we risk never knowing what could have been. The future is a mystery. Kaldor's eyes met hers. Not all mysteries need to be solved. Some are better left unsaid. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, caught between his past and future self, between the woman who represented his mission and the man who embodied his future. And in that moment, he realized that the choice ahead of him wasn't just a matter of alliances. It was about deciding what future he wanted to shape. Would he heed the warning of his future self, or would he push forward with the alliance he believed in? The answer felt impossibly far away. The constant hum of the Neptus Station filled the background, a steady drone that seemed to echo in Arya's mind as she stood by the observation deck. Her palms pressed against the cool railing, fingers gripping the metal with a quiet urgency. The stars outside shimmered, distant and indifferent, as her mind raced through flashes of the future. Neptus burning, Ethan's anguished face, Zephyr, her sister, standing before her, gazing at Arya as if she were a stranger. The images had come suddenly, a stark and overwhelming flood of sensations that left Arya breathless. She couldn't shake the weight of the visions, each one more vivid than the last. The future was no longer just a concept. It was something she could feel, something that was happening now, swirling around her, slipping through her fingers. A soft step behind her snapped Arya back to the present. She turned to find Zephyr standing at the doorway, her violet eyes clouded with concern. Her presence was a steadying force, but it also reminded Arya of the storm brewing in her mind. "Arya, you've been standing here for a while," Zephyr said, her voice gentle yet filled with an unspoken worry. "Is everything all right?" Arya hesitated, unsure of how to explain what was happening to her. How could she put into words the visions that had haunted her, the sense of inevitability that surrounded her? She had tried to keep it to herself, but now facing Zephyr, it was impossible to keep quiet any longer. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. I saw something," Arya said, the words barely leaving her lips. Zephyr stepped forward, her gaze unreadable as she came closer, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "What did you see?" Arya's eyes drifted back to the stars beyond the windows. "Neptus. It burns. I saw it. And Ethan, he was there, like he made a choice. But it wasn't just that. I saw Dromus, my people. They were waiting for me." Zephyr's posture stiffened slightly, her hand curling into a fist at her side, the tension in her muscles betraying her calm exterior. "Is this what you've been seeing? The future?" Arya nodded, her breath shaky. "It's more than that. I feel it, Zephyr. It's like I'm connected to it, to everything." Zephyr stood still for a moment, her violet eyes narrowing as she processed the weight of Arya's words. She took a step closer, her voice softening with understanding. "You're not alone in this, Arya. We'll figure this out together." Arya clenched her fists, the turmoil inside her rising. "But what if we don't have time? What if it's already too late? What if the future is set and we can't change it?" Zephyr's hand landed gently on Arya's shoulder, her touch both reassuring and strong. "You can't be sure yet. We don't know what it all means. But if you're seeing it, maybe it's because you're meant to change it." A chill ran through Arya, her spine tingling with the weight of Zephyr's words. She had glimpsed futures, each one more terrifying than the last, but she had also seen the strength in herself. What was she supposed to do with that strength? Could she really change what was coming? "I don't know if I can change it," Arya muttered, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. "It feels like everything is already decided, but I feel like I'm supposed to stop it." Zephyr's voice was steady, though there was a flicker of tension beneath her calm words. "Then we'll figure out what needs to be done. Together. You're not alone in this." But Arya wasn't sure if Zephyr's words would be enough to settle the storm inside her. The future felt too volatile, too chaotic. She had seen flashes of herself, strong, broken, a leader, a failure, all standing at the heart of a storm she couldn't control. Each vision felt like a possibility, each one more real than the last, and the weight of it threatened to crush her. Ethan stood at the center of the dimly lit docking bay, the cold air of the station biting through his uniform. His mind raced as he processed the situation. Kaldor stood across from him, his figure imposing, his expression like stone. The man, or was it his future self, seemed unyielding, a force to be reckoned with. Kaldor's voice cut through the tense silence. "You think helping Zephyr and Arya is the right path, but you're wrong. Every step you take toward them, every decision you make, brings humanity closer to extinction." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. He had heard these words before, spoken by Kaldor in hushed whispers and veiled warnings. But hearing them now, in the cold reality of this confrontation, made his resolve harden. "I don't care what you believe, Kaldor. I won't let you stop me from doing what's right." Kaldor's eyes flashed, a strange mixture of contempt and desperation. "Right? You speak of what's right, but you're blinded by your ideals. The alliance between humanity and the Dromus will tear us apart. Your species will be nothing more than a puppet of their influence." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut, but he steadied himself, refusing to show any weakness. "You're wrong. We're building a future where we all work together. You can't change that." Kaldor stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Ethan's. You think you're the savior of humanity, but all you're doing is signing its death warrant. You'll lead humanity into servitude under their rule, and it will be too late when you realize your mistake. Ethan's heart raced, the gravity of Kaldor's words settling deep within him. But no matter how hard the future self pushed, he couldn't back down. I won't stop, and you can't make me. Kaldor's lips curled into a cruel smile. I don't have to make you. I just need to make you see the truth. You'll understand soon enough. Before Ethan could respond, Kaldor reached into his suit and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and a low hum filled the air. The lights in the docking bay flickered, and the sound of heavy machinery groaned as the station's security systems powered down. Ethan's eyes widened. You're hacking the station? This is just the beginning, Kaldor said, his voice cold. I will stop you, by any means necessary. A deep sense of dread crept over Ethan, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let Kaldor have his way. He stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. You won't win. You're not the future I'm fighting for. Kaldor's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. We'll see about that. With a sharp motion, Kaldor activated the device again, and the once muted sounds of the station's emergency alarms began to blare throughout the area. As the lights flickered in time with the rising sirens, Ethan turned to face Zephyr, who had just entered the bay. Her presence brought him a measure of calm, but there was a new urgency in her step. Ethan, we need to stop him, she said, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. We will, Ethan replied, his voice steady, despite the chaos around them. But we need to act fast. Zephyr turned to Kaldor, her gaze sharp. You can't control this future. It's not yours to decide. But Kaldor only laughed, a bitter sound that filled the cavernous docking bay. You think you understand what's at stake, Zephyr? You're all playing with fire, and you don't even know it. This isn't just about you or about Ethan. This is about the survival of every living being. The Dromian, with their influence, will destroy humanity. Ethan's gaze remained locked on Kaldor, his mind racing through every possible outcome. The more he heard, the more it seemed like Kaldor was trying to protect humanity from something far worse. But Ethan wouldn't believe that helping Zephyr and Arya could lead to ruin. Zephyr stepped forward, her stance resolute. You think you can just impose your will on the future? You can't control what's coming, Kaldor. None of us can. Kaldor's expression flickered for a moment, a shadow of doubt crossing his face, but he quickly regained his composure. You'll all understand in time. This alliance will be the end of everything you've worked for. But if you won't listen now... He took another step back, his hands moving toward a different set of controls on his suit. Then I'll show you. With a sudden jolt, the station's gravity control system flickered, and the floor beneath them trembled as if the very structure of Neptus was being ripped apart. Ethan and Zephyr were thrown off balance, but both regained their footing quickly. I won't let you destroy this station, Ethan shouted, his voice filled with determination. If you have to destroy us to save humanity, then I'll stop you, no matter the cost. Kaldor's lips curled in a sinister smile. Then let's see if you can. The tension between them snapped, and Ethan dashed toward Kaldor, determined to stop him before it was too late. Kaldor wasn't just an enemy, he was a twisted reflection of Ethan's future, a future Ethan couldn't and wouldn't accept. Zephyr quickly moved to Ethan's side, her eyes scanning the chaotic surroundings. The station was on the verge of total shutdown, and they needed to act fast. Ethan, we don't have time for this. We need to neutralize him now. The urgency in her voice snapped him out of his focus. Kaldor was playing a dangerous game, but they weren't going to let him win. As the alarms grew louder, Arya's voice suddenly came through their comms. Ethan, Zephyr, the future is shifting. Kaldor's interference is causing ripples. You need to stop him now, or we may not be able to fix it. Ethan's mind raced. Arya had seen it. The future was no longer a fixed point. It was a living, breathing entity. And the more they hesitated, the more Kaldor's version of events would become the reality. With a final, determined look at Zephyr, Ethan made his decision. They would fight for their future. Together. Let's end this, Ethan said, clenching his fists. They were no longer just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for the future of everything. The station, the alliance, and the future itself depended on it. With that, the confrontation between Ethan and Kaldor erupted into chaos, both sides willing to fight for their beliefs. The future would not be decided in silence. Ethan stood alone in the central command room of Neptus Station, the flickering lights from the emergency system casting long shadows over the walls. His chest was tight with the weight of the decision he had to make. In front of him, the control panels blinked with a mixture of warnings and status updates, but none of that mattered anymore. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, and as the pressure mounted, Ethan found himself at a crossroads, an impossible choice that threatened to tear him apart. On one side stood Kaldor, with the future of humanity in his hands, warning him that the alliance between humanity and the Dromus would bring about the extinction of his people. On the other stood Zephyr, whose faith in the potential for a united future with other species gave him hope. But could Ethan really risk it all? Could he stand by the choice that Kaldor believed would lead to the fall of humanity? The words of Kaldor echoed in his mind. You can't see it now, but everything you're doing, every choice, will lead to the collapse of your species. The Dromus are not saviors. They are conquerors. Ethan's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. You're asking me to abandon the very thing that I believe in? He muttered aloud, the words more to himself than anyone else. Kaldor's voice responded from behind him, a shadow in the doorway. No, Ethan. I'm asking you to save humanity. I'm asking you to prevent the inevitable. His voice was calm, almost pleading. If you truly want to protect those you love, you will stop this alliance. You will stop the Dromus before they twist humanity into something unrecognizable. Ethan turned to face his future self. You're wrong, Kaldor. I can't stop what's already in motion. The Dromus aren't here to destroy us. They're here to help us evolve, to help us grow. Kaldor's gaze hardened, his hand moving to a small device on his belt. You don't understand. Your growth will be your undoing. You think you're protecting the future, but you're not. The Dromus are manipulating you, Ethan. They'll control you, and when they do, humanity will be lost. As the station's emergency alarms echoed through the halls, Ethan's mind raced. Could he change time without destroying everything? What if Kaldor was right? What if the future he was so desperately trying to protect would only lead to humanity's doom? His hand hovered over the comms button, but something in his gut told him that the answer wasn't to run away from the alliance, it was to stand firm. Ethan! Zephyr's voice broke through his turmoil, her presence a steadying force. She stepped forward, her calm gaze never leaving his. You don't have to do this alone. Ethan met her eyes, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. Zephyr, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm caught between two futures, one that promises unity and one that promises survival. But which one is real? Zephyr placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm and reassuring. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that shape us. You've always believed in the strength of unity, Ethan. You've always wanted to see humanity work alongside other species. Don't let fear cloud that vision now. Her words were like a spark in the dark, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of clarity. Zephyr wasn't just talking about their shared dream of peace. She was reminding him of the core values he had always held, values that had brought him to this station in the first place. Unity, not division. Cooperation, not isolation. With a deep breath, Ethan turned back to Kaldor. I won't abandon the future I believe in. I won't let fear control me. Humanity deserves more than just survival. It deserves to thrive, to evolve, and to grow. With others, not in isolation. Kaldor's eyes flickered with anger, his fingers tightening around the device in his hand. Then you'll force me to do this the hard way. His voice grew cold, his earlier desperation turning into something darker. If you choose this path, Ethan, you'll lead humanity to destruction, but you'll be the one to destroy it. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes unwavering. Then I'll take that risk, because I believe that future is worth fighting for. Zephyr's presence beside him grounded him as they faced Kaldor. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt like he had made the right choice. He wasn't just defending a future that could be, he was fighting for a future that should be. A future where unity and cooperation could exist between species, despite the challenges. Kaldor's expression shifted, a mixture of disappointment and rage flashing across his face. "You don't understand what you're about to do," he spat. "The Dromus aren't what they appear to be. They will destroy you all." "We'll see about that," Ethan said firmly. The finality in his voice left no room for doubt. Kaldor stepped back, his eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this. Humanity will regret this." But Ethan was resolute. He had made his choice. He would not back down from the future he believed in, no matter the cost. As Kaldor turned and disappeared into the shadows, Ethan's heart still pounded in his chest. There was no going back now. The future of the Alliance, of humanity, depended on what he did next. He had taken the first step toward building something better, something stronger. Now he would face the consequences, but no matter what came, he was ready. Zephyr looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "You did the right thing, Ethan. We'll face whatever comes together." "Together," he repeated. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, the steady thrum of adrenaline blocking out everything else. He reached for Arya's hand, his fingers brushing hers. The moment they touched, something sparked between them. A jolt of energy rushed up his arm, the sensation foreign yet strangely familiar. The weight of the moment settled in, both of them locking eyes, feeling the pull of something larger than themselves. Without a word, they both moved as one, kneeling at the center of the chamber. Arya's fingers tightened around his and their bodies shifted closer. The air around them thickened as the energy built. Ethan's breath quickened, his chest rising and falling with the intensity of what was happening. Arya's lips parted slightly, and her gaze flickered to his, silent but filled with something undeniable. Their hands remained clasped, but as the ritual progressed, Arya leaned forward, a subtle movement that made Ethan instinctively do the same. The connection between them grew, spiraling outward, tugging at the edges of their minds, hearts, and bodies. Then Arya's face drew near, and before he could process it, she closed the space between them, pressing her lips to his. The room around them blurred, their bodies frozen in the moment of the kiss. The energy between them surged, electricity crackling through their skin, a deep pulse thrumming through the air. Ethan responded, his hands gripping her tighter as the connection between them intensified. He felt her pulse, her breath, her emotions, everything blending, merging in a singular, impossible sensation. The kiss broke, but the tension between them didn't. Arya pulled back just enough to look at him, her breath ragged. She was trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was the overwhelming power of what had just happened. Her fingers still tingled with the aftershocks of their connection. Ethan looked back at her, their bond now tangible, something they could feel, touch, and sense in their every movement. Suddenly, the door crashed open. Kaldor stormed into the room, his eyes wild with fury. Without hesitation, he moved toward them, his voice sharp and angry. "You think this moment is enough? Do you truly believe that the power of your bond will save you?" Before Ethan could respond, Kaldor moved forward, his gaze locked on Arya and Ethan, seething with contempt. He raised his hand, and behind him, 23 soldiers surged forward, weapons drawn. Zephyr reacted immediately, stepping between them and Kaldor, her hands raised. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice cold and commanding, but Kaldor paid no heed. Ethan didn't flinch. He moved instinctively, stepping forward as Kaldor approached. Arya stood firm beside him, her hand reaching for the small blade at her side. Her fingers brushed the hilt, but she didn't draw it yet. This wasn't a fight of weapons, it was a fight of wills. Kaldor's lips curled into a sneer as he drew closer. "You think this ritual will make you stronger? You're nothing more than puppets, dancing to their tune." His soldiers flanked him, advancing on Ethan and Arya. But Ethan didn't budge. He stood his ground, not with anger, but with resolve. His chest rose with steady breath, the weight of what was at stake flooding his senses. As the first soldier made his move, Ethan sprang into action. His body moved faster than thought, ducking to the side, a swift kick sending the soldier crashing into the wall. He spun, meeting Kaldor's eyes as the soldiers began to circle, Their movements synchronized, but Ethan and Arya were in sync now too. They fought as one, their bond making them faster, more fluid, each movement a reflection of the other. Another soldier lunged, but Arya was faster. She ducked under his arm, spinning behind him and locking him in a chokehold. With a quick twist, she brought him to the ground, leaving him unconscious before turning back to Ethan, her eyes filled with determination. Kaldor growled, his hands clenching into fists. "Enough!" he snapped, but his voice was lost amidst the chaos. He surged forward, grabbing one of his soldiers' weapons and charging at Ethan, fury in his eyes. But Ethan was ready. He stepped to the side, his movement fluid, knocking Kaldor off balance with a swift kick. Arya didn't hesitate. She darted forward, her blade flashing in the dim light. But Kaldor was quick, too quick. He caught her wrist in midair, twisting it sharply, forcing her to drop the weapon. Just as Kaldor raised his hand to strike, Ethan was on him, his fist crashing into Kaldor's jaw, sending him stumbling back. Arya immediately followed, her feet moving like a blur, delivering a series of precise strikes to the soldiers who were still advancing. Every move they made was coordinated, like they were dancing in sync with the very energy that had been shared between them. Their bond had made them more than just allies. It had made them unstoppable. But Kaldor wasn't finished. With a roar of frustration, he pulled a device from his belt, triggering an explosive charge. The entire chamber trembled as the blast went off, knocking everyone off their feet. In the chaos, Ethan barely had time to react. Arya was knocked back, but she quickly regained her footing, her eyes scanning the room. Kaldor was still standing, his fury unabated, but now the stakes had changed. The walls of the chamber had cracked, dust floating in the air, but the bond between Ethan and Arya hadn't broken. They were stronger than ever. Ethan stood, fists clenched, his breath heavy, looking at Kaldor across the debris-filled room. "You won't stop us," he said, his voice steady despite the battle. "Not now, not ever." As Kaldor looked at him, eyes filled with malice, he knew the fight had just begun. Ethan and Arya were ready. Together they would fight for their future, no matter the cost. The air in the chamber was thick with the smell of smoke and burning debris. Kaldor stood at the far end of the room, his body tense with fury, eyes locked on Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya. The blast from earlier had left a gaping hole in the walls, and the room was now a battlefield, debris scattered everywhere. Kaldor's soldiers circled them, but Ethan wasn't afraid. He had learned long ago that fear only clouded judgment. Without hesitation, Kaldor raised his hand, and the soldiers lunged. In a blur of movement, Ethan was already moving, dodging the first blow and countering with a fast jab to the soldier's throat. He spun, ducking low as a second soldier swung at him, landing a powerful elbow to the man's midsection. Behind him, Zephyr moved like a shadow, her lithe form weaving through the soldiers. Arya, her movements sharp and precise, disarmed another soldier with a quick flick of her wrist, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. But Kaldor was no fool. He wasn't going to rely on brute force alone. With a roar, he gestured toward the walls and the room shifted. Energy pulses shot from the broken walls, a trap designed to separate them. Ethan's eyes widened as the floor beneath their feet began to crack, sending debris scattering. The room was coming alive, the walls closing in, the air thick with danger. Kaldor was controlling the environment, but Zephyr was ready. She raised her hands, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She extended her senses outward, reaching into the energy swirling around them. Ethan could feel the shift, the subtle warmth in the air as Zephyr manipulated the environment, pushing back against Kaldor's energy. "Stay close," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to break his control over the room." Arya nodded, her violet eyes flashing with determination. Her power was different, but it was just as potent. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, her expression had shifted. She could see the threads of time, the changes they had made, and the consequences of their actions. She could feel the moment stretching out, the power of her vision guiding her decisions. She reached out with her mind, syncing her thoughts with Zephyr's, creating a link between them. Together they began to push back, The energy surrounding them shifted as Zephyr's powers intertwined with Arya's vision. The room buckled under the force of their combined abilities, and Kaldor's control over the environment began to unravel. "You can't fight fate," Kaldor snarled, his face twisted with anger. He extended his hands toward them, and the air grew colder, sharper. He was pulling at the very fabric of reality, trying to bend it to his will. But Ethan wasn't afraid. He rushed forward, using his momentum to land a solid punch to Kaldor's chest, knocking him back. The energy from Zephyr and Arya surged in the room, and Kaldor stumbled, unable to keep up with their combined strength. "You're not the only one who can manipulate fate," Ethan growled. "And you're not going to destroy what we built." With a fierce roar, Kaldor lunged again, but Arya was faster. She ducked under his strike, her movements fluid as she used the energy around her to propel herself toward him. Her hand shot out, grabbing hold of his arm, and she twisted it sharply, forcing him to the ground. Zephyr was right behind her. She grabbed Kaldor by the shoulders, her fingers glowing with energy as she held him in place. "It's over, Kaldor," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You can't control everything. You can't change the future." Kaldor's eyes burned with fury as he struggled against their hold, but he was powerless now. The combined strength of Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya was too much for him to overcome. He glared at them, hatred seeping into his voice. "You think this changes anything? You think your petty alliances will save you? The universe will destroy you. It's only a matter of time." Ethan stood tall, his fists clenched. "It's not about saving ourselves, Kaldor. It's about protecting the future, protecting everyone, not just one race or another." Kaldor's expression faltered for the briefest of moments, doubt flickering in his eyes. He had underestimated them, underestimated the bond they shared. The ritual had changed everything, and it was too late for him to undo what had been done. With a final defiant grunt, Kaldor's body went limp, unable to fight any longer. The soldiers that had once followed him stood frozen, their resolve shattered. Zephyr released her grip on him, and he slumped to the floor, defeated. Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya stood in the center of the room, breathing heavily, their bodies worn but resolute. The room had fallen silent, the battle over, but the weight of the victory was far from over. They had fought for something much greater than just their lives. They had fought for a future. As the dust settled and the soldiers retreated, Ethan turned to Zephyr and Arya, a deep sense of pride welling up in his chest. "We did it," he said, his voice low but filled with certainty. "We've changed the future." Zephyr nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Together we've created a new path, one that no one can erase." Arya stepped forward, her expression serene, but there was a spark in her eyes and unspoken understanding. "The future is ours now," she said softly. They had won, not just the battle, but the war. And in that moment, Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya knew that their alliance had changed the course of history. No longer would they be divided by fear or manipulated by forces beyond their control. They had built something new, something that would stand the test of time, a future that belonged to all the peoples of the galaxy. The smoke in the chamber began to settle, and the quiet that followed was deafening. Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya stood at the center of the room, their bodies bruised but their spirits unbroken. Ethan's chest heaved as he scanned the aftermath of the battle, his fingers still tingling from the last fight. Zephyr straightened, her posture steady, but her breath betraying the exhaustion she tried to conceal. Arya, her face serene, wiped a streak of blood from her cheek and looked toward the horizon, feeling the weight of the victory settle around her. Ethan shifted his weight, glancing over at Zephyr, who stepped closer. "It's not over yet, is it?" he said, voice low, the meaning of their victory not yet sinking in. "No," Zephyr answered, her voice tight with resolve. She reached out, laying a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "But the hardest part is behind us. We've proven that we can overcome anything, but now we need to build on it." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Ethan's gaze hardened. He clenched his fist, feeling the echo of their struggle vibrate through his body. "We will build it. We'll make sure it works." Just as the resolve began to settle in, Kaldor's voice pierced the quiet. He stepped out from behind a broken pillar, his movements slow, deliberate. His face was grim, but his eyes held a flicker of disbelief. "You've won," he spat, voice full of frustration. "But you still don't understand, do you?" Ethan straightened. He turned slowly, locking eyes with Kaldor, his gaze unwavering. He had seen this man as a threat, but now he only saw the realization dawning in Kaldor's eyes. He wasn't in control anymore. "What's your next move, Kaldor?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but with a tinge of anger. Kaldor's lips curled into a bitter smile, but there was no triumph behind it. He clenched his fists, eyes flashing. "You think this changes everything? You think this alliance is the answer?" He took a step forward, the movement slow but measured. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." But Zephyr didn't flinch. She stepped in front of Ethan, her gaze never leaving Kaldor. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "This isn't about one race being superior. It's about all of us growing, learning together." Kaldor's sneer faltered. He raised his hand, ready to lash out with one last desperate act. But before he could, Arya moved swiftly behind him, grabbing his arm and twisting it just enough to send a shock of pain through his body. His breath hitched, but she didn't let go. "You've lost," Arya said, her voice soft but resolute. "This isn't your fight anymore." Kaldor winced but looked over his shoulder, a dark laugh escaping him. "You think this is over? You think your victory means anything?" He jerked his arm from Arya's grasp but didn't make a move to escape. "I won't be the last to stand in your way." His words hung in the air, but Zephyr didn't move. She glanced at Ethan, then at Arya, a silent agreement passing between them. "The future has already been written, Kaldor," she said, her voice low, almost sympathetic. "You're just too afraid to see it." Without another word, Kaldor staggered back, his anger giving way to doubt. He stood there for a moment longer, as if trying to summon the strength to fight again, but he didn't. Slowly, his shoulders slumped, and he turned, retreating toward the shadows. Ethan's eyes followed him for a moment, but he didn't waste another thought on Kaldor. The weight of the moment, of the victory, was sinking in now. He felt the burden of their mission shift. "We've done it," Ethan said quietly, his voice just above a whisper, as though speaking the words to himself. Zephyr nodded. "We've only just begun," she replied, her gaze settling on Arya. "But this is what we've fought for, a future where we're no longer divided, where we're stronger together." Arya stepped forward, her eyes calm, but there was a fire in them now, a sense of clarity. "The future is ours now," she said, "and it's not just about survival. It's about making sure that everyone, every race, has the opportunity to thrive." Ethan looked at the two of them, feeling a surge of emotion. He wasn't just standing with Zephyr and Arya. He was standing with the future, with the power to shape it, to make it better. The bond between them had been forged in fire, and now with Kaldor gone, they were free to create the world they had always dreamed of. "We're not just defending the future," Ethan said, his voice firm now. "We're building it, together." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense or oppressive. It was peaceful. It was the quiet after a storm, where all that was left was the calm and the understanding of what had just been accomplished. As Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya stood there, they realized that the true victory wasn't just in defeating their enemy. It was in realizing that they had opened a path for all the species of the galaxy. The universe had changed, and they had been the catalysts for that change. The stars above them seemed to shine just a little brighter, and the future, unknown and vast, stretched out before them, full of promise. They had won, and now they would create the world they all deserved to live in, together. As Ethan, Zephyr, and Arya stood side by side, the weight of their victory settled into their bones. The galaxy, once divided, now held the promise of unity. Kaldor's defeat was not just a personal loss. It marked the dawn of a new era. The stars above seemed to whisper of hope, a future where differences were not weaknesses, but strengths. They had fought for more than survival. They had fought for a future where cooperation, not conflict, would guide the way forward. The journey had only just begun, but together they were unstoppable. The future was theirs to shape.